And
I'm not yelling. I can't yell.
you want me to be the hype guy, like Joe House on Shack House? What's doing? What's happening? Emerald City.
Okay. Well, welcome to another. What is this, Mike? What are we doing? What is this? I see you on my screen. I hear you in my headphones. This feels somewhat familiar. What are we doing?
I don't know. I will say that with the backlighting, my facial hair looks much more luminous and nice than it actually is, which I really appreciate. So anybody who gets to check us out on YouTube, I definitely look sharper with bad lighting than with good lighting.
It does. I don't know. I'll just. How long have you grown that thing? Like when's the last time you
4 days?
Okay, that's not bad. You should let it grow down. You should go for, I don't know. I mean, you're from like backwater New York, right? Like, you should, I don't know. Let it grow out. Let it grow down.
Yep.
Everybody, that's the thing, right? Beards are in.
I don't know. I've severed New York from my life, so you know.
That makes two of us. All right. We are actually back. The EHC Podcast is back. Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland, the podcast. Mike Hattery, of course, joining me. I guess that's a normal thing. It used to be anyways. We haven't potted in, I don't know, it's probably close to, 6-7 weeks with the Indians streaking and, I don't know, things on the schedule clearing out a little bit. Looks like the EHC Podcast is getting dusted off. Mike, we're going to just jump right into this with Jose Ramirez. Player of the week this week, not really a big surprise. And last night, actually for the past couple days and DMs and kind of subtweets from old Twitters of the past, we've been kind of alluding to the fact that Jose Ramirez is really good. Uttering kind of, sort of hyperbole statements like Jose Ramirez might be the best player on the team. And I think, obviously body of work wise, you got to look at Francisco Lindor and you look at upside and you got to say Francisco Lindor. But this past week kind of showcases just how talented Jose Ramirez is. And at a year older than Francisco Lindor, we really don't know what sort of ceiling we have with Jose Ramirez, because what we're doing here is we're looking at a guy, I think, physically, I mean, for years now, we've been talking about Francisco Lindor's body and not in that weird way, but in that developmental way where we could see this kind of power developing for him. When you look at Jose Ramirez, you see this little spark plug. You don't see that. You see this, not necessarily super fit guy, but he's more athletic than he appears. So appearance-wise, he doesn't look like a guy that has a lot of upside compared to Lindor. But here's a guy who's starting more and more to look like a guy who's going to hit 330 at some point in his career and clearly has 20 home run power. Now, that might be the ceiling for it. But, is the sky the limit for Jose Ramirez? And why we're saying, like, right now he's the best player on the team, because he is. Like, what is the ceiling for this guy before we look at what he's been doing over the past couple of weeks?
7 WAR? Is it like a 25 or a 20 homer, 20, a bunch of 20 homer, 20 steal seasons, maybe? Man, he's so good. I brought down the wrath of Twitter last night just because I got bored, truthfully. I was at a bar playing Golden Tee, and I said, let forth the dogs of war, both the literal and figurative sense. But with Ramirez, look, the last 900 plate appearances, he and Lindor have been really similar players, and one of them is not playing their best position. And it's not I'm taking shots at Lindor thing. It's maybe we should start to appreciate that, maybe Jose Ramirez is a star level player. We need to start having that conversation based on how good he is offensively. He's good on the base paths and he can play everywhere. He's a rich man's Ben Zobrist right now. We're moving into that territory. And Ben Zobrist was a nerd star for 5 years. And I know nerd stars aren't what people want, but for me, it's pretty satisfying.
Go ahead. No, go finish that thought.
And I think the other thing that we look at too is, I know in some ways Lindor's down. We have the batting averages down and the glove hasn't been perfect, but the glove's still been good. And we're seeing the most power we've ever seen from Lindor. And maybe there's some sacrifices batting average wise that come with that for Lindor. And so I think it's, there's this thing where we're comparing Ramirez right now and we compare the last year and a half and people say, well, we're picking the best sample for Ramirez and we're picking, way down one for Lindor. And that's definitely possible. But I also think there are ways in which Lindor is really surpassing what we thought of him. Not what we thought of him, but power expectation wise, I think he's surpassed what a lot of people thought. And so I don't think this is just Lindor is completely in the tank. He's playing well. His offense isn't perfect, but he's playing well. And Ramirez is just playing exceptional baseball. And they're really similar players for the past year and a half. And that's pretty insane.
Well, and so I kind of made this comment. I think it was in a DM. It might have been just flat out on Twitter, where it feels like these are the two guys that can, it really is going to come down to a slump here or there that's going to separate the two, or perhaps streaks like we're seeing J-Ram go through right now. And the other piece to this is defense. We're seeing Lindor. I guess you could say it's a down year for defense for him thus far. I mean, it's mid-June, and and we can get down this path if we want to, but it feels like these two guys are going to be the nip and tuck sort of statistics as the years go on. You mentioned a 7 WAR guy. I mean, let's be honest. If J-Ram's a 7 WAR guy, I mean, what are we expecting from Lindor? I mean, are we expecting him to be that 9 or 10 WAR guy? And I suppose we are. I suppose but here's the thing: if he takes a dip in average. If he takes that dip in average and his defense maybe takes a slight turn down, and that still makes him a really good defender, doesn't that limit that ceiling a little bit with the WAR? And aren't we talking about the same realm? So couldn't this be really two players who year after year after year might be one overtaking the other depending on a streak?
Yeah, I think so. I do think that for the first time, the most attractive thing about Jose Ramirez was always the fact that he had an amazing floor. He could play anywhere, he could steal bases, and he was going to make tons of contact. But now, we've seen him add power. It's not costing him much base running value. He's playing everywhere. He's playing a rock solid third base. I think he's someone where if he was 4 inches taller, we'd be like, hey, this is a great defender at third. Playing third and being 5'9", I think is something that's pretty hard to do, and something Ramirez does really well because he's so athletic. But yeah, I think you're really right. I think where we can have an honest conversation where we can say, maybe I just think the ceiling gap is much smaller than it used to be in this conversation, if there is one. I think it's a lot smaller because Lindor has to be just an exceptional defender. And I think he's selling a little bit of average for power. We'll see. I think his offensive season's weird this year. He's pulling the ball away more, which is where he's getting some of his power. But pulling the baseball costs you batting average wise because infields can shift you, and that can be a cost. So I think we'll see. But I do think for the first time, Ramirez's ceiling has gotten really close. Individual season WAR ceiling has gotten really close to Lindor's, and
some of this could be settling in at third base, and we were skirting on the edge of talking about this. And I don't want to get into this today, but we've raved about his play at second base for so many years. It feels like he's been a second baseman. The reality of the situation is that he hasn't been a second baseman for any extended amount of time for 4 years. I mean, it's been a long time. Now you kind of ask yourself, you made a really good comparison saying perhaps a rich man's Ben Zobrist. Right now his position is third base, but I think you're kind of looking at a case where it's going to be where it's going to be. So this is his second season at third base. Perhaps we have to start, maybe as he settles in defensively, when we've seen it this year play out, perhaps we're going to see him improve down the road there, which is part of the reason why his numbers are going up. The really interesting thing for me, Mike, especially when you try to project forward using any sort of statistic, is that there are always these guys that kind of outlie. And when you look at a guy like Ramirez, I mean, if you go way back to 2011, 2012, his first 2 years playing professional ball here with the Indians, and you start off with that really wild year he had at Mahoning when he hit 325 out of nowhere, when everybody was like, who's this guy? if you think about trajectory, I mean, here's a guy projection-wise who we've always heard people say is very limited ceiling-wise. And we've skirted around that as well. I think you and I, of anybody else, has probably had that ceiling a little bit higher. But don't you think that if you were to put this on a graph and you were to put the ruler down and you'd go from year to year to year to year, you mentioned a raised ceiling, but isn't this a case where we really, while we try to project, it feels like to me, Mike, we still haven't seen anywhere near where his ceiling could be based on a few different factors, defensively being one of them, but the power, the fact that he's sitting at, I think 11 home runs right now is insane to me. I mean, I think that was the ceiling for Jose Ramirez. And clearly in my mind, 10 was the ceiling. I didn't think we were going to see much more than that. Now we're talking about a 2020 guy. I still think there's more than 20 steals there. I mean, this is a guy who's stolen more than 40 bases in the minor leagues. And I feel like depending on where he hits in the order, we could see that change. They're just, to me, where he ends up in the next 2 or 3 years really could set the table for how good he can be. We start skirting around All-Star. We start skirting around the term MVP. It feels like to me, Mike, that we don't know the ceiling yet. This could be a guy who's battling for team MVP, battling for perhaps league MVP on a really good baseball team over the next 2 or 3 years.
I think one of the things that'd be really interesting is I think if you line them up, Ramirez is the guy who got to the big leagues at a younger age, which I don't think can be understated considering Lindor.
By many years.
Can't be overstated. Considering Lindor made it there at 21 years old and Ramirez was there at 20, which is huge. Guys just don't get to the big leagues at 20, and I think that's something. I think if you stripped their names and their prospect pedigrees and just compared them side by side for the last 4 years, age and level, I really think that it would be really. You wouldn't have a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'll take this guy." I have a clear favorite. I don't think there'd be a clear favorite. I think the only clear favorite that exists would be, hey, this guy plays shortstop. That's a more valuable position. I'll take that one. But I think if you sort of remove the pedigree and what everybody's been saying about, Lindor for years, and he's a star. He's a freaking star. But you know what? Jose is too. And that's sort of where we are. You and I have talked about this in the past. I always compare players, sometimes foolishly. I don't always compare players. I try and avoid direct comps, but I think it's really interesting. And this is one of those situations where it's really hard to talk about how Jose Ramirez is without just dinging Lindor a little bit, which is really dumb because Lindor is exceptional and he's amazing. It's just, this is how good Ramirez is now. I mean, he's really effing good. This is an MVP candidate caliber player. And so it's hard to contextualize that without comparing him to a teammate and without comparing him to Lindor, who's a top 10 position player in baseball. So that's fine.
He's battling. Here's what he's battling though. I mean, you know it and I know it. I mean, Jose Ramirez, when you're saying in April that Lindor is the face of Major League Baseball, and you've got Jose Ramirez kind of playing the same game that he's been playing since 2012. This, nobody knows me. And, if you go back through the Indian system, Danny Salazar kind of was down that path for a while. You have these guys that, the quote unquote guys in the know don't know about. And they see a number 325 and they say, well, here's a guy that didn't, got kind of lucky. He was streaky, blah, 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 blah. And Jose Ramirez kind of falls down that path where he's not a guy who's been on the national stage in the eyes of a lot of prospect people and now in the eyes of a lot of, talking heads on TV. So he's not the face of the franchise. And I think, the problem with Jose Ramirez winning the MVP at this point is, he's got, while he's, he won Player of the Week. He's hitting, I think, 550 over the past week. You've got guys like Edwin Encarnacion, who they spent all this money on, who's having, he's at 375 over the same span. We're starting to see some of that power, multi-homer games. He's got to overcome a lot just on this team. Not to mention teams like the Astros and some other players out there who are just tearing the ball off, and you can go on and on with that. But maybe this just is one of those seasons, Mike, where Jose Ramirez, even though it should have been last year, but he did get overshadowed by a few different people on the Indians, Lindor being one of them, This probably is going to be, if he continues down this path, this is going to be maybe the Altuve year. And again, I'm not trying to comp, but they do comp very well. I'm not trying to comp, but if you go back. If you go back a couple of years when nobody knew who Jose Altuve was, for a couple of reasons. One, because Houston wasn't very good. Two, because Jose Altuve, he didn't come out of nowhere, but because the Astros weren't very good, I mean, he had that one kind of breakout season. Well, Ramirez's breakout season really was last year. I think maybe to the national public, when you go down these Jason Kipnis like month-long streaks, but your floor for how bad you hit is much higher than a guy like Kipnis, who sometimes dives into the toilet bowl offensively. This could be the year that Jose Ramirez breaks out, much like Jose Altuve did a couple years, don't you think?
Yeah. I adore this conversation. He's just so good. So here's something I have to do. I have to do this because, this is technically a gamer podcast, and I want to talk about some stuff. So I'm going to ask you some blank hypotheticals. Just want to get your take on it. So if you have first and second and nobody out, and you have your 5-hole hitter up, and you bunt him, and it's a successful bunt, which is a risk, and you have second and third and 1 out, what are they going to do with your 6-hole hitter? Are they going to walk him? Are they going to pitch to him? Or are they going to go pitch to Yan Gomes or, I don't know, a 24-year-old rookie? Which one are they doing? A second rhetorical question.
I was just going Well, I mean, these are important questions though, because when you talk about the amount of bunting that the Indians do, and I mean, when you walk down this rabbit hole of Terry Francona, it's a difficult discussion to have. But as I try to steal this rhetorical from you, I mean, I don't know how many sacrifice bunts the Indians have had over the past couple of 5, 6, 7 years, but we've got to be dealing with, I don't know, 100. 110, I don't know, a lot. Like what? I mean, I guess this is more rhetorical back at you. You can even be a layman fan who doesn't really follow statistics in any other way other than looking at home runs and doubles and triples and whatnot, not to understand that bunting isn't always a good idea. And it's, baseball's a lot like chess. Like you just mentioned, position-wise, where you're hitting in the lineup is very important. Who you have hitting behind you is very important. And sure, if you go player by player by player, sometimes a bunt makes sense. But when you lay out the terms the way you just did, I mean, come on. I mean, anybody who's listening to this, who gets mad, oh, here they go talking about bunting again. I mean, come on. We're not talking about, like, elite thinking here.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, too, like, I think this is even separate from the bunting debate too. Because the bunting debate tires me too. And you know what? Sometimes I'm pretty okay with Roberto Perez bunting. I just am. That's life. I'm okay with that. But the thing where, if you're bunting your 5-hitter, 4 and out, you're basically saying, with nobody out, you're saying, I want my 7 and 8 hitters up with second and third, or the bases loaded and 1 out, instead of my 5 and 6 hitters up with first and second and nobody out. And so I just think that's a horrible decision. Even if it's, you want to talk about the run expectancy, all that bullshit, I don't care. You're picking your 7-8 over your 5 and 6 to hit with runners in scoring position. And that's just, an inefficient decision. The second hypothetical I would have for you is, say you had this fringy 5-starter. Okay. And say that fringy 5-starter.
When you say fringy, Mike, is this possibly a guy who maybe tops out at 87, 88?
It is that sort of guy. Okay. He has 2 pitches. Curveball's kind of fun. The rest isn't. And so, you give up a couple of scorching line drives. You have a 5-2 lead. You're in the 5th inning, and with nobody out, he's facing one of the 15 best players in baseball the 3rd time through. And you say, do I really want my iffy, probably middle reliever type pitcher, or should I go to the pen? What do you do there? Because I'm asking, because I'm really dumb about baseball, and people tell me this all the time on Twitter, because, Terry Francona is much smarter than me. He totally is. And that's what I'm told all the time. And so I'm just really struggling with this hypothetical, because it seems like there's a clear answer, Jim. It seems like there's a clear answer.
Well, I mean, obviously we know, without getting into that too much, I mean, we talked about Tomlin, and the hard piece with Tomlin, you've got the underdog thing out there, and people like to talk about that, and you've got what he did in the playoffs, because everybody else was hurt, and you've got to deal with that, and you have these stretches, these really weird stretches where he pitches really well, struggles for a couple of innings, and then closes out strong, which is very strange in and of itself, which kind of fits a lot of the strangeness of the season. Now, let's be honest. I mean, as things even out, as things regress to the mean, I mean, we've talked about this with Tomlin over the past 2 or 3 years. This is a guy you don't want to get to the third time around against any team. Maybe he gets lucky with some of these AL Central teams that aren't very good, that we made look good because we were struggling throughout the early part of the season. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, teams like Baltimore, who are struggling right now, but who have, you've got Machado on the team, who you're talking about here. I mean, this is, and of course, as we sit here, they give up, down 6-5 now because of that. Well, actually, no, that's for another thing. But I just think, Mike, we've talked about the piggybacking option. We've talked about, when you utilize a bullpen, especially one with as many guys that are in it right now. I mean, it does seem to make a little bit of sense to maybe throw a guy or two out there instead of putting him through. But you and I both know this. This is a Francona thing. He's got his guys, and we can run down the list of them, the litany of Tito Francona guys over the years. Certainly, Josh Tomlin is one of those guys. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't go through the lineup a couple of times, but don't you think with the bullpen that we have, and while, a guy or two may be struggling here and there throughout the year, isn't it time that we start playing around with that a little bit? I mean, it's not like Josh Tomlin, unless people are hurt, is going to be pitching in the playoffs as a starter. So isn't it okay if we use our number 5 guy or number 4 guy or whatever you want to call him? Isn't it okay to maybe put him out there, get him through 4 innings, and then start bringing in this vaunted 15-man bullpen that he's got going now? I don't know. It's just me, but it seems like we keep saying that eventually that's what's probably going to happen, except for it's not happening. So I ask you, Mike, is I take your rhetorical question away, and we kind of saw that play out today where, up 5-2 now, down 6-5, a lot of that to do with Josh Tomlin allowing the game to tie up at 5-5. But don't you think, Mike, when Danny Salazar comes back, if he's healthy, is he healthy? I mean, are we going to see a Josh Tomlin get squeezed out of the rotation the way it should be? Or is it just one of those guys where they're going to keep putting him out there as the 5th guy? They're going to keep mishandling him, kind of like all these other fringe guys that they've had over the years, the Aviles mishandling, the Robertson mishandling that we're seeing now, a guy batting second that shouldn't be. I mean, why does he take these fringe guys and try to make them more than fringe guys?
I don't understand.
But I mean, we're not smart. We're not as smart as Terry Francona.
Look, I don't know. I mean, he is, I think it's worth, before Jim and I get any more pissy about this, to note that we both really revere him and his ability. He was fantastic in the playoffs largely last year, except for a couple of issues. And he clearly is beloved by players. And part of that is this sort of incredible trust he tries to create in them during the regular season. I think the Tomlin start is sort of emblematic of that today. I think that was him saying, I trust your talent. I trust you, guy. Because he's trying to engender that. But I'll return to, what the hell? Why do we have a 9-man bullpen if we're going to push Tomlin out 5 innings? Why do we have that? And I also just – it's also really important to me to emphasize, and you said this right, I love Josh Tomlin. Don't make me dislike him because you misuse him. Mike Aviles is a really good guy. Dan Robertson seems like a pretty cool guy. He's real intense. It seems like dudes like him, and he busts his ass. Just don't play him 5 straight days. He doesn't need to. Don't make him look bad. And to me, one of the key responsibilities of a manager is is a player in a position to succeed? And when Daniel Robertson's playing 5 straight games, he's not succeeding. It's just the way it is. And you know what? The other thing, too, is people act like this is just regular season shit and it goes away. And I'm telling you, if you didn't watch Game 7, we all know how it ended. And Michael Martinez was there holding the bat while we were holding the bag. And that's what happens when you do this in the regular season. So the Indians are great. Jim and I'm getting way too grumpy for a podcast after the Indians. Basically, they played their best baseball of the year. I'm really excited. They're loaded for bear. But sometimes.
Well, we don't have to talk about these guys anymore. But again, if you think about the litany of guys that we've seen, the Avilases, the Ryan Rayburns, the Daniel Robertsons, all these guys kind of fit into that same pocket, the Josh Tomlins. And I think you have a guy like Ryan Merritt who kind of fits in there too, who might end up there at some point in his career. They bring up Pleco, same kind of thing. We've got all of these different guys that are these fringy guys that in the right scenario really do well. But again, it's June, and we all know that we don't start dialing things in until August. Man, it's frustrating to see, though. And I know we've got some injuries, and we've got Michael Brantley on the paternity list, and so obviously those things play out. But I don't know, man. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to think that we're leaving games on the table, or we're leaving runs on the table, or we're leaving outs on the table with these other guys that are out there. All right, I do want to talk a little bit about pitching. This is kind of a general topic. We've seen over the past 6 weeks, we've seen Cody Allen struggles, we've seen Miller struggles, we've seen Shaw struggles. I mean, not all at once, but we see little dents in the armor. Anything to worry about there, Mike? Overused?
Yeah, Allen and Miller I think are fine. Overuse-wise, I'm concerned about. I'd like to see Lindor get a little more rest than he's getting. He and Ramirez need more than one day off every 4 weeks. There's just we'll see, but I think the Indians are poised to be in pretty comfortable shape come the end of July, and I'd like to see them sort of protect those bodies. But the rotation is what it is. I'm not a Clevenger fan. Other people are Clevenger fans. Bauer, to me, has been really rock solid, and I know his ERA is still in the fives, but he's had some really solid starts. The Dodgers start was awesome. The 14 strikeout start was a couple before that. It was awesome. I think Bauer, who knows if he's turned a corner, but his curveball usage is really cool. He's changed something, and I don't know. And Tomlin Clevenger at the bottom just is going to hurt to me. And it's only going to hurt because I think Tomlin, we've talked about this. It's not progressive. Tomlin with really progressive bullpen usage is really useful as a fifth guy, especially when Kluber went 9 innings last night. What is the bullpen for?
I know.
When you have Kluber and Carrasco on the front end, use these guys aggressively. If you're going to go with an 8-man pen with 2 elite starters at the front who are soaking up innings and 2 elite back-end guys, what the fuck are 3 through 8 for? And you can please bleep that out. But seriously, what are they doing?
Well, and you're 12-0 game. It's 12-0 game, and when you've already had the guy on the DL, but I don't know. The problem with this year, the wonkiness of this year, we have the Central that we're going to win the Central. If we don't win the Central, then we're going to be talking about jobs on the line. But we are going to win the Central. Do you think the problem overall with this team, including maybe management, and again, I say the problem is we're in the midst of this a 6-game winning streak. Don't take this the wrong way, but do you feel, kind of looking over the season, do you feel like the passivity of this team is based upon the division that they're in, and they don't really feel the heat? It seems like a silly thing to say about professional baseball players, but do you feel like they're looking kind of at this, especially with some of the injuries that they had as an extended spring training? And I know they don't, but perhaps, kind of in the back of their minds, they know they don't have a lot to worry about. Is this all ado about nothing? Is this a team that when they turn it on even a little bit, like we're seeing now, offensively, they're pounding the ball into the ground. We have 5 or 6 guys hitting 370 over the past week, power, all of that. But is this one of those things, Mike, where they're going to be able to just turn it on a little bit and mow teams down? But the second part of that is there's still teams like Houston out there. My concern is they're not going to be ready when they need to be ready.
Yeah, I get that. I do think that some of it's much ado about nothing. The Indians in the regular season, if they're a little sub 500 and Tomlin Clevenger starts, that's super fine as long as they make the playoffs. As long as Kluber Kluber, Carrasco are healthy and you have Miller and Allen healthy, like, I don't think anybody's going in because those guys can literally pitch 80% of your playoff innings if all those guys are healthy. And I just don't think a team like Houston right now has anybody who can match them in terms of quality for those 80% of innings. But you're right. I mean, and I think the other thing too is I'm a big, baseball's so variance driven, you can't predict it. But I swear to God, if I've ever thought a baseball team turned it on, it was this weekend. They showed up in Minnesota and like, why the hell are these guys ahead of us in the division? We're going to go get our work done. We're done with this. And that's what they did. It looked more clear. And I'm sure it's, maybe it's variance, maybe it's random. I talk about that all the time. But if I've ever seen a baseball team just turn it on, that was it.
Well, I forget what was it? They 28-8, I think overall. I think we had runs scored. They just pounded them into the ground, and Minnesota's not very good. And we were seeing some very interesting Kansas City tweets over the weekend. Them talking about being, yes, we're the other team that's going to be there with Cleveland, and I think that's kind of jokey. But we've got. I mean, I don't know that there's going to be another 500 team there might be another 500 team in the Central because we play each other. I mean, it's a bad division. It's just a really bad division. If we stay 5 games over, I think we're pretty locked.
Yeah, it's locked in.
All right.
It's not a thing.
Well, as we kind of head towards the tail end of this, Mike, I mean, anything, how about this? Bradley Zimmer. Is this platoon thing going to be permanent, or are they slowly weaning? Like, what are they doing with Bradley Zimmer and why? We've talked about, we talked about this, we've got this fairly gifted center fielder. Center field has been an issue with us. He's clearly our best defensive outfielder at this point. And this is nothing against Lonnie Chisenhall, who does play a decent right field, but you've got the best defender out there. You've got a guy who's supposedly your number 1 or number 2 prospect. I mean, I think with Mejia out there, obviously number 2, but you bring him up and, me, I'm going to be talking about, I get bombarded with, he needs every day at bats. If that's true, if that statement is true about anybody, wouldn't Bradley Zimmer with the new swing, who they sent down so he could get regular at bats, then comes up and all of the sudden, he doesn't need regular bats again? I mean, I get it. Maybe, I get playing platoons. I do get that. But, they were never going to platoon any of their top prospects prior to this. Why in the hell? And we're not talking about guys like pounding on the door to play in front of Bradley Zimmer. And again, I know this sounds like we're bitching, but for me, it's one of those things where why in the hell aren't the Indians optimizing? And don't you want to know what you have in Bradley Zimmer on both against lefties? I mean, it's not like they got guys who are going to be better against lefties to put in center who can also play defense like that. Like, doesn't it balance and counterbalance? So let me ask you this, and I guess that was kind of my long diatribe with that. But do you think that this is temporary? Do you think that come September, if Zimmer keeps performing the way he's performing right now, do you think that he does get at bats more regular? Is this just Francona kind of easing him in?
I don't know what the hell it is. So I categorically disagree that it's like the more efficient decision to platoon him. But even if you accept the notion that it is more efficient, why do we care about being efficient in center field where he's the only plus defender offensively, but we don't care about being efficient with how we use our starting pitchers like Tomlin? We don't care about being efficient offensively with Bunning and things like that. So to me, I don't understand that. And second of all, this dude, he's not the future of the organization, but he's one of the 5 most important players for the next half decade to a decade in the Indians organization. And also he's someone that we need him in center field in the playoffs if we're in the playoffs, so that stuff like game 5 and 6 doesn't happen with Tyler Naquin. I mean, we need him out there. He needs to be ready offensively to hit against left-handed pitching. And so I don't get how the Indians are served in any sense in hiding Bradley Zimmer against lefties all the time, because he's going to need to be there in October. And he needs to be ready to be there in October, which means he needs 150 at-bats against lefties. Let's get him some plate appearances. And why do we have to be efficient about that when he's the best defender? He's super athletic, and he's at least decent plate discipline against left-handed pitchers. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm trying to draw it out here. The game is close to ending, but I do want to ask you one more question. This is actually two more questions. One's going to be kind of out of nowhere, but we're starting as we're closing in on July here. I've gone back and forth with this, and I'm definitely leaning one way, but do you think the Indians are primed to make a move at this point, or do you think that the Indians are happy with what they have? I think we've targeted maybe starting pitching, but perhaps they're not looking that direction. I mean, do you think they pull a move, or do you think they're going to stay put and try to utilize what they have?
It really depends on Salazar health. I think if he was back in like the next 3 weeks and they felt really confident that he was healthy, I think that the need factor goes way down. But I think if he's not, I think you have to do something to solidify, because I do think at the end of the day, while I said you can get 80% of your innings from, Carrasco, Kluber, Miller, Allen in the playoffs, it'd be really nice if like the other 10% came from someone not named Trevor Bauer. So,
well, I mean, you want to talk about piggybacking, a fun little piggyback would be Bauer, Salazar, using Salazar as the guy coming in late, kind of in a starter role, maybe looking at him going 3 or 4 innings. Of course, we've been saying this, hopefully they'd be utilizing something like this, especially with a 10-day DL, but that hasn't really panned out. All right, my last question to you this, Mike. We like to talk minor league baseball, and Francisco Mejia has been, it's impossible not to talk about him. I've gotten into several arguments in the past 3 or 4 weeks talking about guys that are untouchable, and really the only guy I've seen in the past 20 years that's been untouchable is, Francisco Lindor. And I'm starting to think, there were a lot of rumblings a couple of years ago about Mejia being trouble in the locker room. Those didn't pan out. Obviously, there was a lot of people who didn't know what the hell they were talking about, kind of throwing that stuff our way. And I guess my question here, Mike, is offensively, there really haven't been that many players. I don't know that there's been a player at his level offensively over the past few years, progressively through the system. We talk about Lindor and his progression. We talked about J-Ram and his progression. You look at Mejia's progression, and we're starting to see similar sorts of things, not only offensively, but defensively as well. I mean, is he untouchable?
He should be. Right?
I mean,
no one's untouchable, but like, what level of player do you have to get to be willing to move him?
You have to get you have to get whatever you need for multiple years, and who's better than just a 3 or 4 or 5 if you're looking at starters, or better than just a platoon guy if you're looking for guys in the field. So, I don't think offensively they're even looking anywhere to make moves. So obviously I'm looking at starters. To me, if you're going to trade him, you're going to trade him for a guy with control, and you're going to trade him for somebody who you could say is a 1 or a 2. My question, so that's where you can kind of see I'm kind of funneling towards this. If the Indians have an opportunity to get an ace, and I'm not going to throw any names out there because we're not there yet, but let's say they can get somebody who's a 1 or a 2 off of some team that's struggling. Do you put him on the table if you think you can get yourself to the World Series again this year?
No. This is the fight we have to have. This is another podcast.
I'm going to leave it there because I'm biting my tongue and my throat's starting to hurt. All in 2017. That's all I'm going to say. We'll save that podcast for next week. And every time I say that, we don't podcast for 6 more weeks, but I suspect we're going to be doing this more. All right, we're going to wrap things up here. Mike, any final thoughts? I'm not plugging anything because I'm going to try to start writing again this week, but I'm not plugging that. So I'm going to plug this podcast. Make sure you listen to it. And then obviously we're going to tag this podcast with something. I'll let you plug that.
This podcast will be in my gamer because the monotony is a murderous beast. The monotony of gamers. And please, this is my one shout out to the underappreciated Mike Bode busts his butt to do like 2 to 3 gamers a week.
Hold on. First of all, we've got to directly discuss this right now. It's not Bode, it's Bodie. Bodie. You got to call him Bode. When I ask this question in public on Twitter, you got to go down. You got to just go with it, man. It's Bodie. It rocked my entire world.
Anyway, the amount of energy that Michael Bodie can put into all these gamers is truly astounding. I am no match, and I never will be.
I think that we should, Michael, when you listen to this, because I know you will. We're pushing for you to do all 7 every week.
You want them, you got them. You got them. What's really great is, as a closing remark, I in the 3rd inning or the 4th inning wrote this as the Indians winning, and was just going to insert the score at the end of the game. And then in the 9th inning, in the 8th inning, I changed it to the Orioles winning, and now the Indians have 1st and 2nd and 1 out on the top of the 9th. So
and Santana is up, my friend, and
hopefully I have to change that again.
I mean, if you want, I can talk slow, and we can wait to close this out and make it a 1-hour podcast. I mean, we haven't potted in a while, so I'm sorry, but the fact that a Brock is on the mound is just awesome to me.
Brock.
Yeah, well, of course, his brother Brett Brock, who used to pitch for the Indians for like 27 years at every level. Gosh, I hope that's not Brett Brock, because if it is, no, it's not. It's his brother. But anyways, I feel like if we close this out, Mike, and he hits a 3-run bomb right here, we're going to really shortchange ourselves. So should we just ramble on until Santana hits?
I think we should call this. You want to do the announcing? I think I can. Here, let me do my Matt Underwood interpretation. Santana's at the plate, and he's got a pretty long swing, and we haven't liked him for 7 years. And here's some irrelevant statistic with runners in scoring position. What do you think about that, Rick?
I hope he doesn't walk, because, I mean, we want to score runs, and if he walks, that'll just put someone on base and not score a run. Now, see, there's silence there. There's silence there, and there's never silence, because they never stop talking until I mute them. He is working the count really well, though. I will say this. I'm ahead of you by like half a pitch. One last thing here. I'm watching this game on Masson because I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina right now, and for some reason, Baltimore is the home team here. I'm watching on Masson. Mike's stream right now, he's watching the game on his computer. His stream is literally a half a pitch behind Masson. I mean, like, are you kidding me? First of all, this Masson sucked. Like, I mean, they're using like, it's like 360. It's not even 720. I mean, it's the worst. I can see pixels. Oh my gosh. I almost would rather listen to Manning and Underwood than watch this game on Masson. But, a typical Carlos Santana at bat, it's going to be like another 15 minutes before we get out of this. He's working the count really well. Maybe not that well.
Damn it, Carlos. Classic.
Well, he didn't get – so you're literally not even a half pitch behind me. You literally are at the same exact point I'm at, and you're on a computer stream. Screw you, Masson. So now what do we do? Now there's a runner on third with 2 outs. Do we just end it? And don't worry, so. I can cut all this shit out.
That's good. That's good.
All right. Do you want to just close it out? Or do you want to just sit here? All right.
He legged out an infield single.
Well, no. I mean, it was a fielder's choice.
Oh, then why did somebody call it an infield single?
It definitely is not an infield single because there were runners on first and second. They were going for the double play to end the game. It's a ground ball to first base. Throw to second, throw to first.
Classic. Lowe's flailing away at some bad pitches tonight. Get off your Twitter account, you big sucker.
Who said that?
I don't know. Some asshole I follow. All right.
One of the 12 people.
The Indians lost to the Orioles 6-5. So there you go. Tell me if that changes before I.
All right, go.
Are we still on? Are you going to take us off the air?
It's still live. I'm not going until this ends. Now you're making my job hard because now I got to figure out where to cut this. All right, hold on. 0-1 count. What are you at? You got 0-1 too?
I turned it off.
Okay.
My wife is texting. She demands my attention.
Warning track. Game. 6-5. All right. Thus ends a sad affair. EHC returns and ends the Cleveland Indians winning streak. Mike, it was good talking to you, my friend. Happy summer.
You too. Come back north.
I'll be there soon. I got my golf clubs. They're over here in the corner. I cleaned them all up.
Good.
All right. So hopefully we won't kill the tribe anymore like we did tonight. All right. Go Tribe. Peace.